Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Pritika and this is the first in a series of videos called Kickstart Agile. In this series, I talk about how to kickstart and set your agile projects up for success. Before watching this video, I'm assuming you already know what agile is or have some awareness of Scrum, XP, etc. I'm assuming you also know what user stories are and how they're used. If you don't know these things, I've added a few links in the description box that are great sources, and I would recommend you take a look at those before you watch the rest of this video. When kickstarting an agile project, a lot of teams start with fleshing out the product backlog using user stories and what is called a story list. And so I thought this would be a good place to start for our first video. With that said, let's get started. And so with this, I thought that I will talk about a little bit about what user stories are not, and they are not requirement documents. I thought I'd put in this disclaimer early on in this presentation because I've seen so many quote-unquote user stories that are 2-3 pages long and contain so much information that no one could be bothered to read them. What they are, though, is a reminder to have a conversation with your customer and a reminder to have a conversation with your team. They also need to focus on the what and the who and the why instead of the how. Let's say, for example, you're building a payment gateway. So your user stories don't need to have elaborate descriptions of how the payment gateway would behave, UI components, how it would be implemented, etc. Rather, it would speak more about why you need a payment gateway and why you need to build the features that you need to build in there, and it would talk about what those features would be. And so it would make sense to have a list of these use stories so that you remember to have that conversation with the client when it's time to implement these stories. They're also a tool to communicate with your team and client, not a replacement for communication. So a lot of times I've had people come up to me and say that they haven't implemented something as a part of the feature because it wasn't mentioned in the user story or on Jira or on Trello or whatever. And that to me is a smell that the team is thinking that user stories need to be requirement documents and you need to have all of the explanation of how a feature needs to be built. Whereas it's just basically a start to that conversation that you need to have with the team on how that feature needs to be implemented and what are the things that need to be a part of it. They also need to be lightweight and contain high-level artifacts. These could be mockups, wireframes, or even pencil drawings, but I feel like having UI components as a part of user stories helps ease that conversation. They need to be simple enough for anyone to write. In normal agile teams, I've seen scrum masters and project managers usually write stories, but I feel that user stories need to be a collective responsibility so that everybody in the team owns it, which means that they need to be really simple to write and they need to have really simple format. What is important though is that different teams are different, and so the simplest format that works for your team is what you need to go with for user stories. So what is an initial story list? It's basically your product backlog written down as stories. An initial story list is an initial set of stories that you create after interacting with your customers and your stakeholders to get your project or a phase of a project started. The word initial here is really important because it's what your story list is. It's a set of features that a customer and stakeholder think is required for your current phase of the project at that time. It might change, it might evolve, but at the time, that's what it is. In my mind, the initial story list should cover items that can be built in at least in the next 4 to 6 weeks. Once we have enough stories just for that period of time, the team can get started on building the features. Some agile teams call this a master story list, but I don't like that name because the word master implies that the list of features that the team has agreed to build are there in that list. And agile software development cycle really has emphasis on changing and evolving based on feedback and the way customers interact with the system. We will speak more about this when we come talk about sprint planning in later videos, but for now, that is what initial story lists are, basically a list initially of stories that you have that are good enough to get your project started working on the product. So really quickly, let's just cover what this video is going to be talking about today. It's going to be talking about how to break down a scope document into features, and I'll show with example how we can do this. How to break down features into reasonably granular stories, how to create an initial list of stories and detail them out enough so that you get a general idea of the scope and the complexity of what you're building, and how an initial story list could help you estimate your project if you want to estimate at all. And I'm going to be doing another video on how to estimate stories later, but we'll skim on that a little bit in this video as well. So I've spoken about this a little bit at the beginning of this video, but here's a list of stuff that you should know before we get started on the examples that we're going to show now. A general idea about Scrum and XP, obviously. If you're using this to create your own story list, my assumption is that you understand the product you're building very well, have some sort of scoping document or designs or something like that, and you've spoken to stakeholders. So you have a general idea of what you're going to be building and the features that are there in this. And you have a general idea of what user stories are and how they're used. With that, let's move on to the fun stuff, which is actually, I'm going to walk you through how I would go about creating a feature breakdown and then a story list from that, and a little bit about how I would sort of communicate that with the team that I'm collaborating with. I thought I'll just walk you through a demo of how I would go about creating an ISL or an initial story list. I usually use Google Spreadsheets for this just because it's so much easier to collaborate with the rest of my team and with the client and things like that. But use whatever works for you guys. I would recommend spreadsheets though. And also, I wanted to just mention that this story list. We're assuming that this product is an employee feedback app, and I've already spoken to the client. I've already sort of understood what the product's going to be, what the major features that need to be built in are. I have some sort of visibility about how the product is going to evolve in the next few weeks and few months. And I also have access to some designs, mock-ups, some sort of UI that I can use to refer to when I'm building this. So I start basically with a feature breakdown, and this is basically, you could call them features, you could call them epics, but they're really high-level features that need to be built into the product. It's helpful to obviously list them down in terms of priority, but it's not necessary. So in this case, I've obviously jotted down high-level features that I think need to be built into this product based on the conversation that I've had with the client and the scope document that I've taken a look at. So login and registration, profile creation, project feedback, and so on. I also have another column for owners, just because a lot of times you'll be working with a team of stakeholders on your client side, and there will be different people involved with different parts of your product. And so this is just a little reminder of who I need to speak to regarding a particular feature and get any questions answered and things like that. So once you have a feature breakdown, you're happy with it, you've discussed this with the client, you guys and your team, and you guys are all on the same page as to what are the high level features that would compose this product. Then you would go on to creating the actual initial story list, and basically that is breaking down features into smaller stories. Now, this is the template that I usually use for my story list, and this is not set in stone. Use whatever works for you, but this is just to give you an idea of what a template works for me for initial story list. So it has a story number, obviously. The story number is going to be used when I actually move the story list into Trello or into Jira or into Mingle or any other project management tool that you're using, just so that I can easily discuss it with my team. The story name, this is basically just a one sentence, or not even a one sentence. It's about a few words of what the story is about. The feature that it belongs to, obviously. The narrative. Now, some of you might think that this is too early in the game to
be writing narratives. If you don't know what narratives are, I'll be posting a video about that later, but I can also put in some links down below. But basically, a narrative um, is a way for you to communicate what the story is about and why the story is required. So if you look at this one, as a sysadmin, I would like to email a user who's activated his or her account every week to complete their profile so that they are encouraged to enter their details. So over here we already have who wants this story to be implemented. What is and obviously the so part of it talks about why the story is required, and what the story is going to be doing is the middle part of the story. Don't worry about this right now, but it's just useful to have the narrative in the ISL, simply because it sort of helps you understand, helps you prioritize, helps you estimate, and helps you come up with a lot of questions that you might have regarding that particular story. I also have a column for comments. This is basically whatever details you need to add regarding the story that you cannot add in the narrative. So, for example, in the case of a basic profile creation story, you will say basic details for the employee database should be autofilled, full name, date of birth, gender, etc. So basically stuff that you need to add so that you can A, get it verified with the client, and B, also be able to speak with your developers and the rest of your team when you need to start talking about estimates and estimation. I always also have a column for questions. These are basic questions that you need to ask either your team or your client or things like that. And as and when those questions get answered, I sort of start removing them from this column so that by the time you are ready to start work, it's useful to see that most of the questions on your questions column have been answered. Not necessarily all of them would be answered, but most of them should be answered. I always also have a column for links to the design, just because it helps during estimation and helps during story writing and things like that. And when once you actually port the spreadsheet into project management tool, a lot of times the design link will go as well, so you don't have to go searching for designs at that time for stories. So this is how my initial story list would look. Um, Now it does take some time to create this, but it's time well spent because it will save you time a lot going forward. In the next part of this video series, I'll be talking about how you'll be using this story list to create a release plan and to prioritize and to get estimates from the rest of your team. So basically, once you've prioritized all of the stories in the story list with your client, you would get estimates from your developer on how the stories, how much time the user stories would approximately take. Uh, well, estimation is debatable, and I'll speak about more about that in the next video. And also a release plan, how you would use a story list to come up with a release plan and even a sprint plan. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or any comments or any feedback, I have put in my email ID is agilepritika@gmail.com. I'll link that down below as well, and I'd love to hear more from you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.